Hello and welcome to the Addicts Anonymous podcast. I'm your host, Jim. Today is episode 226, and today we're going to have a discussion with Jules. We're going to be talking about the 28-day challenge that he has come up with for his journey of sobriety. So we're going to talk about that. First off, how are you today, Jules?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Thanks so
Uh,
much. Good to be here, Jim.
all right, good to have you back. So let's first give the audience a quick overview of your story. Let's get into your story because I think that's going to relate very much, like you said before, into how you came up with this 28-day challenge or 28-day mission, whatever you want to call it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me back, Jim. First of all, and yes, so my story is really one that, if you looked at it from the outside and you kind of jumped into my life probably 20 years ago, you would look at it and think that there is no issue. So I brought up in a Christian home. I'm one of four. Okay, that meant I didn't get a huge amount of time with my parents, and that's perhaps something that caused me to look for other things. I trained as an accountant with one of the big four globally, chartered accountant firms. I was being very well paid. I'd got married. I'd got a couple of children. The church that we go to, Holy Trinity Brompton in London, it's the kind of the home church where Alpha started and the recovery course started. So you'd look at it and think, wow, this couple have got it made. You know, they're kind of good job, good career, married, kids, everything. But the problem is that what people didn't see was that back at around age 11, I got exposure to some pornography. And it was very innocuous. I remember I was camping and somebody put a picture of a certain female part on my head, and so as I woke up, that's the first thing I saw. And it was almost like, I guess, a kid in a sweet shop. It was like my eyes suddenly went, "Oh, this is good. Oh, I like this." And then that lasted for probably 20-25 years. And of course, it steadily got more prolific because, to start with, it's very difficult to get hold of stuff. I'm 48 years old, so if you can imagine, kind of age 11, it was kind of the top shelf stuff, and it was difficult to get hold of.
Yeah.
Whereas nowadays, it's much easier. Type a little bit in the internet, you've got everything straight there. So I went through that whole DVDs become available, and that's probably where it took a big turn for the worse, because what I realized is no matter how many partners I would have, and wrongly, I was very promiscuous during university and so forth. And every time I got together with somebody different, I assumed the pornography would tail off, and it would tail off for a little bit, but then it would come back again. It was almost like one of those kind of that heavy rucksack constantly trying to drag me back into watching stuff. And then it all came to a head in 2006. I got hauled into my boss's office and was asked what this search string meant, and I said I didn't know. And then he said, "I think what these three letters mean this, and you've been accessing pornography based around this for the last, we can see, for the last couple of years." Now, the insanity of all this, by the way, very quickly, was I had just fired somebody only a week prior to being found out for downloading hardcore pornography, and yet I was still looking at pornography on my work laptop. I mean, you look at it and go, duh, that's really, really stupid. So I almost lost my job because of that. I had to have then the conversation with my wife, which, as you can imagine, was a horrendous conversation to have. And then I realized I needed to do something about it. So I went on to the recovery course, which is Holy Trinity Brompton in London started that one. And it took a couple of goes. So for anyone who's listening that thinks, "Oh, I've done a recovery course and I found it really difficult and it didn't work," give it another go. Or, as I'll talk about a little bit later on, there are other options out there, because I created something almost born out of some of the frustrations I'd had on with the recovery course type things. So anyway, so I went to the recovery course. Second time through, I got a sense I was losing the addictive habit. So the sense I would still be watching things, but it wasn't like I got to get my hold on this stuff. And as soon as my wife was going to be out, I'd start planning what I could access and so forth, or how I would get to a shop for various different things. And so that started tailing off, which for me was amazing. But there was still something that was ticking over in the background. Perhaps every couple of months I would kind of have a revive or a relapse. And so this then came to another head in 2016, where my daughter got diagnosed with autism, and I just didn't know how to react to it. It meant I had to learn a new language to try and interact with her that I wasn't used to. It was so much change coming at me, because suddenly now that we knew this, we needed to interact very differently. It meant a whole load of extra stuff, sorting out schools and various different things, because that all kind of triggered. And where that led me was I ended up relapsing, and quite badly relapsing, so much so that I couldn't see anything forward. And
let me ask you something real quick. Do you consider anything like a healthy amount of pornography to be ingested? Like if a guy does it once or twice a week, is that okay?
So it's a really interesting question, Jim, and I get asked this a lot, which is, can I just watch some? I mean, I would always say absolutely not. But the reason being, let me explain that, because if we think about it, when we've got all those images, pornography isn't just the physical act of watching and whatever you do whilst you're watching. It's the images get kind of burned into our minds. And therefore, what this means is that almost I don't need to have the pornography then to fantasize. And so in reality, the more I'm pushing into my mind, the easier it is almost to fantasize and then start acting out. And so in reality, what I found was by stopping completely, what that meant was the images started disappearing. And so it then became much easier to wake up in the morning and just get straight out of bed, as opposed to, I don't need to explain. And the same thing, just daydreaming. Instead, my daydreams would be normal daydreams, and I'll come on to the fact of why daydreaming can be really important. But instead of it constantly going back to the images that I've almost got stored in my head, so it's a bit like with an alcoholic. They'll say one little sip of alcohol, and suddenly all bets are off. I think it's the same. What I personally found, and so have an awful lot of colleagues that I've helped recover from pornography and other addictions, is that actually that level of abstinence really has to be zero, because otherwise we're just making it more and more difficult for ourselves every time, because it's like fill our minds up full of bad stuff and images. It means that I've almost got to let another period of time for those images to kind of disappear out of my mind.
Yeah. So yeah, back to your story. Keep going.
Yeah. So at this point, I realized I needed to go. So I was actually working with the recovery course. I was teaching some of the sessions, so I had to stop that, because clearly, if I was relapsing quite heavily, that wasn't appropriate. So I stopped that. And then actually it was a conversation with the person who was running the leadership course with me and some others, a chap called Justin Rees-Larkham. And I met with him for dinner because my wife had said, look, you need to do something about this, because I'd started explaining to her that I was starting to have suicidal thoughts on quite a repeated basis. Every time I would be in the car, I would be thinking, oh, if I just do that with the steering wheel, I could end it all. And that was my absolute lowest point. And so having to explain that to my wife was horrendous. And then, but having to explain it to a friend, Justin Rees-Larkham, was really actually soothing. Because
people don't realize how hard it is to admit that stuff, because you feel like I'm so different than you. Like normal people don't think this way. And if I tell you this, me personally, I know it makes me feel like telling someone makes me think that they think I'm crazy. You know what I mean? Even if they don't think that, even if they're saying, okay, you have an issue, let's get on top of this and try and help you. Even if they were like that and had a good response, I still feel like, they look at me differently now. That's why it's so hard to admit it. You don't want to be looked at differently.
Yeah. Do you know what, Jim? That is so true. And actually, that's one of the reasons when I talk in a second about the 28-day reset challenge, which I created, that's one of the reasons why I don't use the word addiction or addict actually in that specific title, because there is that sense of, if somebody says they're an addict, then it can be that sense, ooh, you're one of those people. And of course, I've been one of those people, so to speak. And I realized that actually there's far more of us out there than people realize. and actually being able to speak to other people about it can be really helpful, or hear other people speaking about it so that they can sense, oh, so I'm not the only one that does this or struggles with this. It's like that, oh, that sense of relief, knowing that they're not the only one. And for me, that was, I remember that first time talking to my wife about it, then talking to Justin Rees-Larkin about it, and also going to a recovery type course about it. Just that sense of relief, hearing other people, the challenges they're facing, is really, really important. So I had to stop all of that, and this chap I spoke to, he just said, read one verse of the Bible a day. So I started doing that. And you know, for some, this is you may struggle with the concept of a higher power. For me, I see Jesus Christ as my higher power, but I'm also conscious that actually a higher power is what you want it to be to an extent. And therefore, for me, as I say, for me, it was Jesus. And so spending a bit more time focusing on something other than just me, because let's face it, when we're struggling with addiction, we focus on me, myself, and I, and therefore I don't think about anything else. So even just thinking about my higher power, it started opening up my mind to new possibilities. And perhaps suicide wasn't the only way out. And for anyone listening that is struggling with suicidal thoughts, I absolutely get that there are times, because I know I've been there, when that's all you can see. All you can see in front of you is death. It's the only possible way out.
Yeah, I've actually experienced it myself, where I guess the best way to describe it is that impending sense of doom. You feel like there's no way out. This is it. There's no way out. You're going to feel like this forever. And the biggest thing, I think, is a lot of us feel no one would understand. We're the only ones feeling this. So many of us think, like I said, we think we're alone. We think we're the only one feeling this, until we get to be exposed to people like you that will spread the word and say, listen, you're not the only one. You know, there are people like you.
And it is so true. There are, I think even in the UK, it says there's 10 million people addicted to something. And it's not necessarily just the traditional ones. I say traditional ones, you know, kind
What's
of drink.
Real quick, you said 10%. What's the population of the UK?
Oh, sorry, 10, so I meant 10 million, and the population of the UK is about 60. So it's kind of 15 to 18%.
That's a very large percent.
Yeah. And then if you then prorate that out to kind of other parts of the world, what that actually means is somewhere between kind of 500 million and 1 billion of people that are struggling with the same things that you and I have struggled with. And I think that the only reason I talk about that as a number is because what that means, and it's exactly as you said, experienced, Jim, and exactly as I've experienced, is we're not the only ones. The amount of times that I will have a conversation with somebody and say, oh, actually, because sometimes people say, how did you get into working in the recovery space? And I'll say, well, I've struggled with some things. And they'll ask, you know, what did you struggle with? And they're like, it's either, it will start off with, often it's a parent or it's a family member. And then often as you dig a little bit deeper, there's often things within them as an individual that's actually troubling them and kind of holding them back. And that's really, you know, part of my role in creating the Reset Challenge was to help people feel they can talk to other people and they can unlock or start thinking about things outside of themselves. Because if I just finished that last bit of the story, by opening up my mind to something apart from just me, what it meant was I could start looking at other possibilities and other dreams. And one of the things that for me was very catalytic was, ever since being a kid, I've always wanted a property in a ski resort. I just love skiing. It's my happy place. But I totally buried that completely with all that addiction for years, decades and decades. And suddenly, as I started opening up possibilities to there may be something other than just me, that dream suddenly started filtering back again. And like with anything, when we put something out into the universe and we start thinking about it, it's like when you think about a new car, every car on the road you notice is that car. You almost get to the stage again, oh, everyone's driving that car. Oh, I'm not sure I want that one now because everyone's driving that car. All it is we've put that thought into our conscious mind as opposed to buried deep in our subconscious mind and started thinking about it. So things started happening and a lot of things fell into place. I ended up being able to buy that ski apartment. I say I bought it. A bank bought quite a lot of it on my behalf, as is the most case with property purchases. And I, even with that as a dream, I struggled with, because I thought it was a bit materialistic. And as a Christian, I was thinking, well, is that right? But what I now realize is that was the thing that I needed to keep me above ground. And then that enabled me to start focusing on my recovery. And then it started enabling me to actually help other people. So it was that sense of, actually, I need to have something to focus on. Stephen Covey talks about begin with the end in mind. And so it gave me the opportunity to focus on something outside of myself, to start driving towards that. And of course, when we have a dream or a passion, we spend a lot of time focusing on that, which means we haven't got as much time to focus on addiction or substance of choice. So naturally, I was spending less time looking at stuff. And it related to your earlier question, Jim, the less I looked, of course, the less images I've got going into my mind the whole time. So it's almost the easier it is then not to look the next time, because I haven't got those images constantly front of mind. So all of that, kind of long story short, I then got involved in the recovery course, and because of COVID, we actually we created a separate course that was purely online to start with, called the Star Life Course, Steps to Active Recovery, STAR. And I wrote the mind section because, as part of my kind of journey through that, I was literally eating every bit of material I could find about the mind, whether that's Dr. Caroline Leaf, Anthony Robbins, Brendan Burchard, all sorts of different people from different walks of life, just to get a sense of actually how we could make our mind our best friend rather than our worst enemy. And so it was as a result of that I then created the 28-day reset challenge, which kind of tried to push all of that, all of kind of my learnings, my struggles, my frustrations into an easily accessible format that people could get hold of. Because one of the things if I look at the key things that I found personally struggling with recovery type courses, was firstly, they're only in-person ones, they're only every now and again. So it's almost like you have to have an addiction in probably a kind of 2 or 3 week window every 6 months. Otherwise, there's not a course that you can actually access, because you can only tend to start them at the beginning. But also, there might not be a course anywhere near you that's focused on your addiction of choice. And of course, what I later realized through my kind of research was actually the addiction of choice, or the substance of choice, isn't actually the issue. It's the life stuff that's holding us back that is actually the issue. But I'll touch on that in a second. But then also, I noticed that quite a lot of recovery courses are quite focused on, they're quite religious. And by that, I mean lots of focus on the Bible. And whilst that's good and helpful to some degree, I was conscious that, and at the time I was struggling with my faith. So therefore, the thought of having what felt like Jesus rammed down my throat just wasn't appropriate for me. So as part of my way of writing the course was very much to kind of pare that back to the minimum aspects. But also it was the sense of, well, you've got 160 odd hours in a week, and you've got a 2 hours of recovery course or session. So what do I do for the rest of the session? So really, I wanted to make something that was accessible 24/7, because let's face it, addiction strikes at all sorts of strange times, and it's often not in fact, it's never when you're in the recovery session itself. It's outside of that. So I wanted to provide kind of tools that could help somebody outside of being in that recovery session. So so that's kind of my story. As I say, on the face of it, all looked like it was very rosy. I guess I'd probably call myself at the time, I would say I was a high functioning addict. People wouldn't necessarily know that things were going wrong, but boy, there was a whole load of stuff going on underneath. And I just got that sense that I needed to do something to help other people, because it took me 25 years to get through the stuff. And I figure if I could help people do it in a much, much shorter time, wouldn't that be awesome?
Yeah. And that's why we do this, to help other people. It's the whole reason I'm doing everything I do. Yeah. There's a lot of people that they want to do good for our community, and you're one of them. So being that you want to help our community, tell us more about this 28-day challenge, what it involves, obviously what you do week by week. I'm not sure if it goes, basically, is there a curriculum for this, so to speak? Or is there like a syllabus that we follow?
Yeah, so well, if I take a step back as to if I look at whether the course is relevant to people, first of all, as to whether it would pique your interest. So part of my research, I realized that there's actually kind of three reasons that people tend to lose track in life. The first one is that we let our mind start dictating what happens, and therefore our mind becomes our worst enemy. And therefore what that means, we're letting our mind take us into all sorts of dark places, ending up with using a substance of choice. What happens when we do that? We feel bad. What happens when we feel bad? We use our substance of choice. And so you end up in this kind of doom loop. So there's the mind section is around actually, it can be our really worst enemy. The second thing that I noticed was actually that by not having a purpose or a dream, it was too easy to wake up every day and just go, why bother? What is the point? There's no point to life. What's the point in living? What's the point in doing what I'm doing? So therefore I've got no purpose for living. And then the third thing was just that sense that I've had a whole load of stuff happen to me. Nothing's going to work going forward. It's all bad. It's the way I'm created. So I'm kind of almost letting the past dictate what happens in the future. And so it was these three things that really got me thinking about how to create a course, a curriculum that can help people to firstly, and that really is the first stage. So it's a 28-day, I've got the 28-day reset challenge. It's a course that is focused on the underlying causes, trying to get the mind in a good place, focus on what your purpose is. But then it does so much more as well, because in reality, it's not specific to a substance. So it's not just for alcoholics, or it's not just for people recovering from pornography or sex or binge drinking or eating or social media, shopping, whatever it might be. Because actually what it really focuses on, the first week of the 4 weeks, is around really our mind. So it starts looking at how do our thoughts work? We have 2,000 to 3,500 thoughts per hour. And that's a lot of thoughts.
How many thoughts per hour?
So we have between 2,000 to 3,500 per hour. And every thought ends in an outcome. So let's say, for example, put that in real life. We didn't just have, I suppose this is a US audience, so apologies, but in the UK, we have this thing called the Channel Tunnel, where somebody once thought, wouldn't it be nice to go from England to France? So we built boats, but it was a thought. Somebody went, oh, that's interesting. We need to get across there and make it nice and easy. And then, of course, that took a load of time. So somebody then had a thought, why don't we build a tunnel? That'd be quite cool. Let's build a tunnel. But again, it started off with the thought, ended up with an outcome of a tunnel. Look at flights. I've just been off to the Netherlands for the weekend, and every time I watch planes take off, it still beggars belief. That great big hunk of metal, how it gets off the ground. Somebody had a thought, I want to fly. I think I can fly. And that thought then manifested in an outcome. But what then happens with thoughts that aren't quite so positive? So let's say I have a thought of, I've had a bad day. So what do I do? What do I do with that thought? If my natural subconscious is bad day, drink far too much, but then I feel bad, so then I have to drink again, and it kind of goes in that vicious circle. Or had an argument with the spouse, watch some pornography, feel a bit better for a few seconds, then feel bad for days and weeks. Wouldn't it be great if you could stop that thought in its tracks? So instead of the thought of, I think I could do with a drink, or I think I might place that bet, or I think I might stuff myself with the chocolate cake that I really don't need. What if I could stop that thought in its tracks? And one of the things I talk about is the 3-second rule. Is using that 3 seconds to go, is that thought going to take me in the right direction? I.e., is it going to help me move towards my purpose? I'll come on to how we find the purpose and dream in a second, but is that thought going to get me into a good place or a bad place? And going back to your original comment, Jim, I know if I was to start looking at some pornography, even if it was just once, I know that's going to take me into a bad place. So therefore, I have to stop that thought. You might say, well, that's easier said than done. And so a lot of it is, it's within that 3 seconds thinking, okay, what do I need to do to change that? Whether I need to go for a walk, make a cup of coffee, get up and do some star jumps, do something that changes the environment. For me, one of the biggest challenges I found, you'd be lying in bed in the morning and suddenly a thought would crop up and you've got a choice. And the thing is, we have that choice. Individually, I have that choice. Do I let that thought manifest? And I know where that's going to lead. Or do I go, oh, don't like that thought, need to change the environment, jump out of bed? And 9.9 times out of 10, I jump out of bed and then actually the thought disappears. So I then carry on with my day. And if it comes back again, I'll change the environment again. And so that's one of the first week is partly talking about our minds, putting our minds to really help us. So we get a thought, we either go, yeah, I like that thought. That's a good positive thought. Or actually, no, I don't like that thought. I'm not going to let that manifest. What I then flick around to is looking at our purpose and dream, because as I found for me, originally it was a ski chalet, then it was creating the Star Life course, then it was creating the 28-day reset challenge. Having a focus meant I would, every time for my 3 seconds, I would think, is watching pornography going to help me get towards that ski chalet? Is it going to get me towards the Star Life course? Is it going to get me towards the reset challenge? Is it going to get me to helping somebody else? Because I can't help somebody else if I can't help myself. And so having that sense of purpose really changed it, because it's like, no, that's not going to get me there. I can't help others if I'm struggling myself. So therefore, I need to think of something different, change the environment. So the first week's very much around finding the purpose and putting the mind into a really good place. And then the second week goes into what people familiar with recovery and the anonymous steps, anonymous fellowships would know as some aspects of the 12 steps. And these are things like forgiveness. And I talk about, why should I forgive? Why should I bother? Because what they did was wrong. Well, yes, that may well be the case. And it's not my role or anyone else's role to say whether it was right or wrong. But unfortunately, our role when somebody's done something to us, our role, if we want to be successful in life, we have to learn to be able to move on from it. And that doesn't mean you're saying what they did was right, but you're forgiving them for it. And I go through how you might be able to do that. How to, and it's sometimes can be quite a gentle process, because some of it where it involves abuse, especially over a long period of time, that could be really hard. But as that proverb says, not forgiving somebody is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Yeah, it's a quote from the Buddha.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it really is like that. Unforgiveness is one of those ones that just eats away at us. But boy, is it hard. Trust me, I've been there. And I imagine, Jim, you've got many stories where it's like, oh, but what they did was wrong.
Yep.
Yes, it may well have been. It probably was. But is it serving you? Or I'd say, how is it serving you? And if it's serving you to put, as I say, is it putting a brick into your rucksack that's dragging you back? Or actually, is it taking a brick out and making the load a bit lighter, and you can then focus on your path, your purpose? So that's the week 2, is really looking at how to make amends, how to forgive and be forgiven. Because the other bit that's really difficult is asking for forgiveness. So especially if we've really upset people, if we have caused offense, caused all sorts of frustrations and hurts to people, we still have to forgive ourselves. And that's another one that is, again, hard. So I take a bit of time just teaching through what does that look like. The third week then goes on to relationships, because what I realized very early on, and speaking with hundreds and hundreds of people that I've worked with through the various different recovery courses and on the Reset Challenge, is that relationships tend to suffer. Choice of spending time watching stuff, drinking stuff, eating stuff I shouldn't do, rather than spending time with a partner, the substance of choice always won. And therefore, what that means is my close friends, my close family, and relationships really, really struggle. So I talk about how to get along with people, how to rebuild those relationships almost from the ground up, but also for perhaps those relationships that you need in life. Because I'll also talk about, we are, if you want to see what you're going to look like in a few years' time in terms of your environment and your purpose and where you are in life, look at the 5 people that you spend most time with. And if they're really go-getters, passionate, dream-filled, purpose-filled people, you'll probably find you fall into their pattern as well and start becoming more focusing on your dreams and your purpose. But if you're spending a lot of time with people that are very negative, or you're constantly at loggerheads with them, you'll find your life tends to stagnate. So I talk about, if there are relationships that you can't just move away from, how to get on better with people. I talk about things like their love languages, because we each receive love in different ways. My wife loves presents, and a gift to her just says, I'm thinking of her. When she buys me presents, I'm like, yeah, whatever. Not really that fussed. So she could have spent hours buying a present, and she gives it to me, and I go, yeah, interesting, next. She's like, oh, how can that be? I've spent hours. And I say, but that's not my love language. It's not my love language at all. Whereas if she says, oh, you're not feeling well, can I go and take the bin out? I'm like, oh, that shows love. She really loves me, because she would do an act of service that she knows that I would like to do, but I can't do. So again, acts of service for me is one of my love languages. So I talk about that, but I also talk about things like attachment theory, and go to quite a lot of stuff where I'll often signpost where you may be able to find some further research or further information if you want. And on most of the days, I also provide clips to different YouTube things where somebody might go into it in a little bit more detail, because clearly we can't fix end-to-end life in 28 days. There's some bits that I think if I can get our minds in a good place, or your mind's in a good place, to equip you to actually really deal with life well, deal with people well, then that's really what that third week is all about. It touches on things like belief and identity. Who do I see myself? And that's one of the challenges, if I may, find with some of the anonymous fellowships is, and even some of the recovery courses. The first thing you get asked is, my name's Jules and I'm an addict. I struggle with that, because as the various different research has taken place on the mind, what we associate ourselves with ends up being who we end up. So if I identify myself as an addict, then I'm always going to be thinking, well, I've got an addictive tendencies, therefore it's always bound to happen. So I'm not really looking for an opportunity to move forward from my addiction. Whereas if I'm somebody that's struggling with an addiction, that almost starts putting it slightly outside, and actually I can then focus on the real me, because the real me and the real you, Jim, and the real people who are listening, I don't believe as individuals we were born bad people, but stuff happens.
I'm a huge believer in, you are basically your parents. I listen a lot to the Dalai Lama, and even he says you learn everything from your parents. There's no such thing as a kid being born and you're holding a newborn in your arms and he's bad. It's okay, now we're going to take this clean slate of a brain and we're going to raise it a certain way, and then that person's going to act a certain way. And the most important factors in their life, or the most important people, are their parents. They learn everything from their parents, and there's no such thing as a bad kid. He was just raised the wrong way by somebody.
And I think that's so relevant, because it also comes back to, people saying, well, I'm just a bad person. Well, actually, go back to the core. And I think as Jim was just saying, you're actually not a bad person at your core. Stuff has happened. A lot of stuff, and as using substances that we shouldn't be using, are because things have happened and we just didn't know how to react. One of the things I talk about is the mood elevator. And if we're at the top of the mood elevator, we're grateful, joyful, wise, we're really in a good place. But so, for example, if I'm at the bottom of the elevator, let's say I'd come on this podcast and I was really frustrated, and Jim, you'd go, tell us about your story, and I go, yeah, well, I was an addict and I'm now fixed, job done. You'd be like, okay, but tell us about the research challenge. Yes, it's a great course. People should just do it. I don't need to spend time. They just should do it. And of course, what I'm not doing is embracing the situation. And so often we don't embrace situations well. How many times have we've gone into a discussion with a really aggressive stance? Guess what comes back at us? An aggressive stance, because often we mirror what we see in the other person. So if we are giving out aggression, we tend to get aggression given back to us. But if we know that, and of course this course is a lot of it's about teaching things I wish was taught to every child. Going back to your point earlier, Jim, about we are the creation of kind of that clean slate, and then it's what happens in those early years, especially with our parents, I think is so true. But so much of the time we don't get taught that we have a choice how we react to other people. Jim, you could be really aggressive with me and say, right, you're talking absolute rubbish. And I would have a choice in that moment to either go straight back at you or go, oh, that's interesting, Jim. That's an interesting point of view. Could I just ask you why you think that? And what I'm doing is just getting a bit more curious to understand actually what's really the underlying cause of that situation. And so many of the times, and again, I teach this in the kind of the first week, and then the bits in the third week, is around getting curious with people, because that means we can develop better within relationships as well. I'm conscious I'm waffling, so I'm going to the last week is then really where I talk about reimagine. So it's kind of it's all about resetting, recovering, restoring as in the relationship, and then reimagine. And this is where we go back to some of the stuff in week 1 about our mind and really start using all those bricks that we've put in our backpack that holds us further and further back, actually utilizing those to propel us forward, which is, well, hold on, that caused me pain. It caused me 20, 25 years to get clean. I don't want that for anyone else. I'm going to use that pain and that challenge and that struggle to propel me to help other people. And I think that's where actually, we're often given a mountain to our challenge are often seen as mountains to climb and what have you. But actually that mountain can often be the thing that will actually help propel us into our future. If you look at most things, why people create things is because they've experienced a different opportunity or a different way, and they want to help other people to get there further, to get there faster, and to help. I would love for every single person listening to this, stand on my shoulders, stand on Jim's shoulders. We've had so much experience, and the sense that I also co-wrote the course with a lady called Emma who struggled with alcohol. And so between us, we've got so much experience. Stand on our shoulders. Let us do a lot of that heavy lift, because that's really why we created that. Going very, very quickly into, I think you asked, so it follows a curriculum in the sense that there are specific topics that it goes through each day. It's around about a 15 minutes of coaching each day, and that'll either be myself or Emma Heath doing a short talk. And then there's a couple of questions. I call it a challenge at the end of that, which is your opportunity. Fill in a little survey. If you want to get an email back to you, just pop in your email address, it will send it to you. And that's really around, so it'll start off with things like, what good has come from your addiction, or your negative thought patterns, or the thing that's kind of holding you back, and then what bad has happened as a result of that. And what we're trying to do there is that whole sense of pain versus pleasure, because we need to get a sense of, oh, hold on a minute, if I do this, if I take this substance, oh, actually, that might be very, very short-term pleasure, but it's long-term pain. Yeah. So therefore, I'm going to run away from it, because nobody likes pain. I'm going to run towards pleasure, but not the short-term pleasure, the longer-term pleasure of a dream, of a purpose, of our passions. So it's very much around a challenge to help really understand what we've been talking about, what we've been trying to coach with. We also put in lots of stories. There's lots of personal stories. I talk a little bit about my personal story that I've shared some of today. The same with Emma. And we also put some other links in there to various different, if there's a particular, let's say Tony Robbins did a great talk around identity, then I'll put the link to that, because he'll go into some of that in a bit more detail. So really it's something that you've got the opportunity within 1 month, 28 days. Now, granted, I think most people probably, they can go through some on a day-by-day basis. There's other ones, perhaps week 2, which is around the recovering piece, or the forgiveness and making amends. For some, that can take a little bit longer, but it can also run alongside. You can carry on pushing forwards with the other stuff as well. But what we've seen from the feedback we've had so far. In fact, I've just having a quick look at some of the feedback, which, if I may, just quickly, a couple of words of feedback we've got from people that are either have done the course or are going through the course. They said things like, this course is fantastic, it's convenient, full of wisdom, that's helped to shift my mindset from around deeply held limiting beliefs. It's working with Jules and the Reset Challenge has literally saved my life. I'm starting to live again. And I think this is really something, it does open up that possibility of a different way forward, something that can actually be much more enjoyable, much more pleasurable, and long-term pleasure, focusing on, and no doubt, Jim, as this is part of your vision, this podcast and the other things that will spawn off the back of it, is part of your purpose, and it keeps you in a good place.
For me, because you hit the nail on the head when it comes to developing purpose. You have to have a reason to wake up in the morning. Like you said, there's got to be a reason to get out of bed, put your pants on, and handle your shit. You know what I mean? Yeah. You got to have this is my purpose. So I feel like I don't want to fail anybody in my group. So I got to get up and I got to make sure I handle everything that goes along with it.
Absolutely. But equally, every time you come across a challenge, you've always got that guiding star, that guiding light of, if I need to get across this challenge, because then I can see where I'm headed to. And as you say, that's the stuff that gets us out of bed. Yeah. Absolutely. So, the last couple of ones. So, as and other people talk about connecting the dots as they listen to the different sessions. It starts connecting dots in their life, and there's so many aha moments. It's brilliant, because at the end of each session, there's the opportunity to write comments on what you found most helpful or what the light bulb moments. So the amount of times people will be there going, "Oh, can't believe I'm only finding this out now, and I'm 55 or I'm 25 or I'm 35. Why didn't they teach this to me earlier?" Because it is literally foundational principles on how to live our life in a way that we act responsibly, we react responsibly, we don't use substances that don't help us, because most addictions are actually things that for a lot of people, it's okay. And therefore that challenge is, what is it that's really making us use that as a crutch? And often it is because we don't have any other purpose. So there is no other point of living. Therefore, well, of course I'm going to drink myself into oblivion, or of course I'm going to eat too much because it makes me feel short-term satisfaction. But it doesn't give us that long-term satisfaction, which, Jim, you talked about it with this podcast, myself with the 28-day reset challenge. That is very much the guiding light. So, if you've got any more questions, you can see all my details. It's on the website, www.reset-reimagine.com. And, please let me help you. Let me serve you in this.
That's great. And thank you for sharing where you can get it. Say where you can get it one more time. What was the name of the website?
So the website it's www.reset-reimagine.com. And from there, you'll be able to read a bit more about my story. You'll also be able to click straight in and access the challenge, or there's a separate landing page it can take you to, which details out in much more detail. We've got a couple of freebies as well on there to kind of whet your appetite on, awaken your true calling, how to start teasing out what that purpose might be. Because part of the challenge is, of course, and I imagine there's plenty of people listening that are going, yeah, Jules, Jim, that's all well and good, but I don't have a purpose. I don't have a reason to live. And so I think it's day 3 or day 4 where I start asking some questions really to help you think about what it is that time just stops because you're so in the moment. And it's things like that. What did you enjoy doing when you were a child? What is it if you help other people, what are you helping them doing that makes you that encourages you to do more of it? And for many of you, my guess is that finding recovery is part of the journey to you then helping others also find their recovery as well. It's step 12, if you're familiar with the Alcoholics Anonymous in the big book, it is very much around that giving back. And it all comes back to having something other than ourselves. It's all well and good working and having more money and earning more and having more cars and houses, whatever it might be. But what I've found, everyone I've spoken to so far, I think bar none, says that's all interesting. But actually what gives me real pleasure, what gives me joy is helping other people. So certainly from my perspective, if I can help you, let me help you. Let's stand on my shoulders. I've got plenty of battle scars. Let me see if I can save you some of those scars. And get yourself signed up. It's available 24/7, so you can start right now.
That's great. That's really awesome. I mean, we need people like you that go out and want to share things that have worked for them. Because some people, when they go to get sober, they don't know what to do. it's just like I want to get sober. Like for me, when I first wanted to get sober, I literally didn't want to do it. I never had researched rehabs. I didn't even know what a detox center was. I had no clue about that. Someone mentioned it to me. I'm like, what is that? And they explained it'll get you off the alcohol. I was like, okay, maybe I'll try that. But at the end of the day, we need people like you to help identify these things, show us the guidance, make sure we know exactly what's going on in our own minds. It's important to try and understand your own brain. And I think courses like you can help with, exploring that and making sure you're making the right decisions based on your thoughts.
Absolutely. As I say, if we step one, if we can make our mind our best friend instead of our enemy, we will find things just start naturally falling into place. Purely because it comes back to the whole car analogy. When you start thinking about a particular car, you start seeing them. That's because you're taking it from your subconscious to putting it into your conscious, and therefore you're focused on it. Whereas, and so in reality, what that means is if we have a natural subconscious that because we've built it, we've wired our brain that says, have an argument, go and get plastered. Have an argument, go and watch stuff I shouldn't watch. Have a disagreement, somebody annoys me or I take offense, go and do X. And so part of this is about rewiring our brain. And there's enough studies now that show that we're rewiring our brain is absolutely possible. We effectively are wiring them every day. And therefore the challenge is, are we wiring them in really well, or are we wiring in bad habits? And therefore this is about almost like trying to rewire them. When you have an argument, instead of argument, go and have a substance of choice, actually argument, go and do some exercise, go and make a cup of coffee. Count to 10. There's a reason why people say count to 10, and that's because our logical brain, when we're in the fit of rage or the frustration, our brain cannot logically think, and that's why people say count to 10. And that's one of the reasons for that kind of that 3 seconds. Is very quickly. It is okay. I haven't got long before my logic brain starts shutting out, and I just start letting all my emotions start tumbling out. And when the emotions start tumbling out, we tend to end up in a substance of choice. So therefore, you've got that really short period of time that says, right, nip it in the bud quickly. Do I want this to take me to X, which I know it will always lead to? No. Okay. How do I get to Y? I need to go and do some exercise. I need to make a cup of coffee. I need to go and do some star jumps, press whatever it is. Have a conversation with my spouse. Go and see how my daughter's doing. Something that takes that thought and changes it completely, because that then means it will end up in a different outcome. Otherwise, that thought will end up in the same outcome it has done. If it was for me, it has done for the same 25 years. And I've had to rewire my brain so that argument doesn't mean go and watch porn. Argument means go and work on my website. Go and do write some more sessions for the 28-day reset challenge. Go and record a vlog. Go and write my blog. And that's another thing, by the way. I tend to write a little blog every week. So sign up on the website. And you'll also get access to my blog, which is free. It's just a weekly actionable insights really on what you can do to put those strong foundations and live a really purpose-filled life. That's my desire for everyone, to have that sense of living a purpose-filled life.
Awesome. Really good things you're doing there. And I think I should thank you for that, because you're helping the recovery community, and that's very important. So getting towards the end, did you have anything else you want to throw in?
Well, really, just going back to where I started, which is, as I say, there tends to be those three things, which, if any of these three things feel like you're getting in the way, whether it's your mind, it's being a worst enemy as opposed to your best friend, you're struggling with purpose, what is life all about, or you're letting your past take hold of your future, and you're in a place where your trajectory is not leading you to a place that you're comfortable with or excited about or passionate about, then perhaps jump onto the website. As I say, it's www.reset-reimagine.com, and let me help you, let me guide you, let me give you a step-by-step roadmap or a blueprint that can really help you to put that mind back into a place where you're in control of your mind. It becomes your friend, with a passion and a purpose to really shoot for, and with your past actually providing that rocket fuel towards your purpose and your dreams, rather than just trying to hold you back. And if any of that resonates, then just say, go to the website, www.reset-reimagine.com, sign up there, take access to the weekly blog, download the course, and I look forward to seeing you all. We also do, actually, starting in February, we're going to be doing some monthly coaching calls as well. So anyone who's on the course has the opportunity just to jump on a call and either fire questions at me. How did you deal with this? I don't know how to do this. Or I'll look at specific topics and coach through that. So what's holding you back? Take the opportunity now. Let my scars not be your scars. Take a step up, step on my shoulders and Emma's shoulders. Let us try and provide you that ability to find freedom from the stuff that's holding you back. You may be like me, that was perhaps what you class as a high functioning addict or whatever. And let me help you. I'd be honored to help you in your journey in any way I can. Thank you very much. And thank you, Jim, for having me on this podcast. As ever, it's hugely lovely just to talk to you.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure speaking with you again. So let me do my little sales pitch for the group. Give me a second here. I'm going to say that if you like what you saw and heard, go below and give us a like. Also subscribe to see when we upload new videos. You can also check us out on all social media like Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Tumblr, you name it, we're on it. I also suggest checking out our website, which is www.addicts-anonymous.com. There's plenty of free resources as well as free literature. Also, Addicts Anonymous has a book coming out. It's going to be out hopefully mid to late February. That is going to be where I write on a number of different topics, from romantic relationships to restarting your life. And then there's also a collection of people's stories. So it's going to be out once again mid to late February. Hopefully I can get some more information on that in the upcoming episodes. So that's all I have for today's podcast. I really hope you enjoyed it. And until next time.